The elevator doors slide open on the 4th floor. Nobody called it there. If you worked the night shift at Broughton Hospital, you'd learn this happens more than anyone likes to admit. The car stops, the doors open onto an empty hallway, and for a few seconds, before the doors slide shut again, you'd swear nothing moves at all. Some nights, you'd catch her in the reflection of the steel doors before they close. A woman in outdated clothing, pink slippers on her feet. By the time you turn to look directly at the hallway, she's gone. This is Broughton Hospital in Morganton, North Carolina. And before we get to the elevator, or the woman in pink slippers, you need to understand exactly what kind of building this is. It opened in March of 1883, under a very different name, the Western North Carolina Insane Asylum. For most of its first century, it operated the way institutions like it operated almost everywhere in that era. Overcrowded, understaffed. If you'd been a patient here, you'd have shared a ward built to hold far fewer people than it actually did, year after year, as admissions kept climbing, and funding never quite caught up. If you'd worked a night shift, you might have been the only set of hands responsible for an entire ward. Sit with that for a second. One set of hands for however many patients happened to need them that night. The hospital changed names twice. State Hospital at Morganton in 1890, then Broughton Hospital in 1959. But for a long time, the treatments barely changed at all. Lobotomies, insulin shock therapy, and electroconvulsive therapy, administered in an era before modern safeguards existed. If you'd been admitted here, you might have stayed for years. You might have been left by a family who simply never came back. If you'd lived it from the inside, meals would have come on a schedule set by staffing, not appetite. Baths on a schedule too. Whatever personal belongings you were allowed to keep would have fit into whatever space a shared ward could spare, which usually wasn't much. Visits from family would have thinned out over the years, the way they tend to when a stay stretches from months into something closer to permanent. For a lot of people who came through these doors, Broughton wasn't a place they passed through. It was simply where the rest of their life happened to take place. That's the world you'd have been living inside, day after day, decade after decade, whether you wore the uniform or the patient's gown. Now picture the ward at night. The lights dim to save power. The corridor stretching out ahead of you. Tile floor cold under fluorescent light that hums just slightly too loud in the silence. Somewhere down that hallway, someone is calling out. Not screaming, just calling, over and over, to no one in particular. You walk toward it anyway. It's your job. That was Broughton, for most of its history. And it's the world that two specific people were living inside, in the spring of 1971. Dr. Paul Douglas Boyles was 37, a staff psychiatrist. Betty Cheek Yarborough was 39, a nurse administrator at the hospital. According to the documented account, the two were involved in an extramarital affair, a relationship that, by all evidence, both of them were trying to keep hidden inside a building where almost nothing stayed hidden for long. On the morning of April 22, 1971, they were seen entering the nurses' station together, around 7:30. Staff nearby heard a commotion. Then, silence. When hospital staff forced the door open, the room was already quiet. That's the detail that tends to stay with the people who were there. Not noise, not chaos, just a stillness that didn't match what everyone had just heard through the wall. Dr. Boyles was already dead, a serrated bread knife through his chest. Mrs. Yarborough was still alive when they reached her. Barely. She died about an hour later. The official account calls it a murder-suicide. Beyond that, the historical record doesn't offer much more. No note. No definitive account of what was said behind that locked door in the minutes before it happened. Just two people, a locked room, and an ending that the hospital staff would spend years trying to make sense of. Now picture yourself in her place, for a moment. Not as a headline, as a person. You're a nurse administrator in your late 30s, walking these same halls every day for years. past patients who've been here longer than some of the staff. You know this building's rhythms, which doors stick, which lights flicker, which wards go quiet by which hour. You've built a life here, whether you meant to or not, and somewhere inside that life is a relationship you know you shouldn't have let happen. You walk into the nurse's station that morning like it's any other morning. It isn't. Whatever happened in that room stayed inside it, literally locked behind a door for the time it took staff to force their way in. Neither Boyles nor Yarborough ever got the chance to explain what led to that morning, and in the decades since, Broughton staff have had to live with a story that ends without an ending. Maybe that's exactly why the stories about this building never stopped. Former Broughton nurse Margaret Langley spent years working inside these halls, and years afterward collecting the accounts of the people who worked them alongside her, enough to fill a series of books she called Haunted Broughton. What she gathered wasn't one story, it was dozens, repeated by different staff members across different decades, all describing strikingly similar things. The elevator is the one that comes up again and again. Work here long enough, and you'd hear it stop on floors nobody requested, doors opening onto empty corridors, then closing again on their own. Stand close enough, and you might catch a faint shuffling inside the car itself, like footsteps that don't belong to anyone standing there. And then there's her. If you spend enough nights near that same elevator, you might see her too, a woman dressed in clothing that doesn't match any decade currently walking these halls. Fuzzy pink slippers on her feet. She'd look calm to you, unhurried, there for a moment, and then simply not. Gone before you're sure you actually saw anything at all. Nobody has ever definitively connected her to Yarborough, or to any other specific person who lived or died in this building. Local tradition offers guesses, nothing more. Some say she's a former patient, some say a former staff member, someone who, according to accounts Langley has collected, may have spent more of her waking hours inside this building than outside of it. None of that is documented history. It's testimony you'd be trusting secondhand. Years of it, collected from people who had no obvious reason to make it up, and no way to prove it either. What is documented is this. 2 real people died inside this building on a spring morning in 1971, behind a locked door, in circumstances no one fully explained. And long after that morning, staff kept reporting the same handful of unexplained details, in the same handful of places, for decades that followed. Maybe those 2 facts are connected. Maybe they aren't. You wouldn't need an invented ghost story to feel the weight of this place. 140 years of overcrowded wards, harsh treatment, and patients left behind by their own families does that on its own, without any help. But ask yourself why an elevator, of all things, keeps coming up. A place that opens its doors whether you're ready or not. A place that stops exactly where it wants to. If you ever find yourself standing in front of it, late enough at night that the hallway behind you has gone completely quiet, and the doors slide open onto a floor you never selected, would you step inside, or would you wait for the next one?